The moment still plays in my head like a pause button I can't unpress. My daughter, Sarah, stood in the middle of my living room, arms folded, voice flat, not angry, worse, certain, you have to take care of her. Sarah didn't look at me when she said it. She looked past me, toward the couch. That's where her mother-in-law, Evelyn, was sitting, legs crossed. She smelled like my lavender soap. The good one I only use for myself. I said it calmly. No shaking. No edge. You should have asked first. I paused, mostly to make sure my voice stayed even. Because this is not her house. My name is Marjorie Hale. I am 62 years old. I've spent most of my life being the reasonable one. The one who smooths things over. The one who waits, who adjusts, who says it's fine even when it isn't. Especially with Sarah. Especially when I thought being patient was the same thing as being loving. The thing is, that sentence didn't come from bravery. It came from exhaustion. From a quiet place that had been filling up for days. Maybe weeks. Maybe longer than I want to admit. It started with a phone ringing after midnight. The phone shrieked through the dark, jolting me from a rare, deep sleep. It wasn't the soft chime I used for friends. It was the jarring, old-fashioned ringtone Sarah demanded for emergencies. It always sounded like a crisis. Even when it was just a whim, I answered without looking at the time. The darkness told me enough. "Mom," Sarah whispered, her voice frantic. "I'm sorry. I know it's nearly 2. I sat up, my heart hammering. Outside. The rain lashed the glass with a violent rhythm, like handfuls of gravel being thrown against the pane. "What happened?" I said, not a question, but a shield held up against the night. "I'm stuck at the conference," Sarah said. "The roads are flooded. I can't get back." She hesitated, then added the hook. Evelyn's marriage finally collapsed. It's over. I knew that name. Evelyn, the woman who had bankrolled Sarah's first business, the one I always felt indebted to. "She's at your doorstep," Sarah urged. "Right now, she has no one else." I swung my legs onto the hardwood. The floor felt like ice. At my doorstep. At this hour, I whispered, stunned. "It's pouring." "Mom," Sarah countered. "She's devastated. She's humiliated." Humiliated. That was the word they used to bypass my boundaries. "So, what exactly are you asking?" I said. "Just open the door," Sarah pleaded. "A few days, until I get home. I owe her this, Mom." "We both do." I didn't answer. I walked to the window and parted the curtains. Through the blur of the storm, I saw a sleek car idling and a silhouette standing motionless near my porch. Sarah's voice sharpened. Sensing my silence, she lost the estate, the prestige, everything. She's fragile. "Mom," then, the sting, "I can't believe you're being this cold when she's in the rain." That hit exactly where she intended. "I'm not being cold," I said. "I'm being realistic." A sharp sigh echoed on the line. It was irritation, not gratitude. "It's temporary," Sarah insisted. "I swear, just a few nights. Temporary." A word used by people who plan on staying much longer than they admit. I stood there in my thin nightgown, the rain drumming a warning against the glass. I thought of the debt Sarah felt she owed, and the guilt she was now transferring to me. I thought of how no would taste like ash for months to come. So, I walked down and unlocked the deadbolt. Some choices aren't based on kindness. They are simply the price we pay to keep the peace. Evelyn stood on my porch like someone waiting to be told what she was worth. "I'm sorry," she said the second I opened the door. "I hate putting you in this position." Her voice was small, practiced small, like she'd learned it. I handed her a towel. "Come in," I said. "You must be freezing." "Thank you," Evelyn said again. Then again. Softer. "Thank you so much." I put water on for tea. Chamomile. The kind people give when they don't know what else to offer. She wrapped the towel around her shoulders and looked around like she was memorizing the place. I won't be any trouble, Evelyn said. I'll barely be here. She smiled. Like that settled it. I showed her the spare room. Clean sheets. Empty dresser. This is just temporary, I said. Finally, out loud. A few days. Of course. Evelyn said quickly, I understand boundaries. She said the word like she respected it. She sat on the edge of the bed. Hands folded. I've never been good at asking for help. She said, but Sarah said you're kind. That hit harder than it should have. I went back to the kitchen and stood there longer than necessary, listening to the house absorb another person. Doors opening, drawers sliding, not loud, just present. I told myself I'd speak up if something felt off. I told myself I wouldn't let things blur. Hope makes liars of us, quiet ones. When someone is hurting, where do you draw the line? The first thing I noticed was the kitchen drawer. I reached for a spoon and came up with a whisk. I stood there a second, staring into the drawer like it had betrayed me. Everything was rearranged. Forks where knives used to be. Measuring cups stacked like they were on display. My old wooden spoon was gone. Evelyn appeared in the doorway. Cheerful. Too cheerful. Oh, I hope you don't mind, she said. I reorganized a bit. It just makes more sense this way. I didn't answer right away. I opened another cabinet, then another. My calendar, I said. The one that was on the fridge. Evelyn waved a hand. Oh, that thing was so outdated. I put it in a box. You weren't really using it, were you? I was. I just didn't announce it. She walked past me and straightened the dish towel. I like a clean flow. She said, it helps with anxiety. My anxiety or yours? I asked before I could stop myself. Evelyn smiled like I'd made a joke. I'm just trying to help, honestly. Later that afternoon, I noticed the frame on the hallway table was gone. The picture of my husband. I moved it. Evelyn said when I asked, it felt a little heavy for a shared space. Shared. That word slid in like it belonged. I picked up the box she'd mentioned. My calendar was folded inside, along with a few other things. Nothing broken, nothing missing, just relocated. I prefer things a certain way. Evelyn said gently, after everything I've been through. I nodded. That had become my reflex. That night, I cooked dinner using tools that weren't where my hands expected them to be. Evelyn watched from the counter, correcting me once about how much salt I used. I went to bed with the uneasy feeling that my house had learned a new rhythm, one I hadn't agreed to. At what point does help become interference? The neighbor across the street waved at Evelyn before he waved at me. Morning, he said to her. Looks like you've settled in. Evelyn laughed. Light and easy. Oh, I try, she said. This place has good bones. I stood one step behind her, keys still in my hand. She didn't turn around. She didn't correct him. Later that day, I came home to voices in my living room. Two women I didn't recognize were sitting on my couch. Shoes off, cups in their hands. Evelyn was pouring tea like she'd done it 1,000 times. This is Marjorie, Evelyn said when she noticed me. Not owner, not host, just my name. She lets me stay here. Let's. One of the women smiled politely. It's so generous of you, she said. Family has to stick together. I nodded. That's what I did now, I nodded. That evening, Evelyn asked me to move my shoes from the entryway. They clutter the space, she said. People trip. People, not me. I ate dinner standing at the counter because the table was full of Evelyn's things. When I finished, I washed my plate and put it away without saying a word. She watched, then adjusted the dish rack after I walked off. You don't have to be so tense, Evelyn said. I'm not trying to take over. I didn't answer, yes. I was too busy noticing how quiet I'd become, how careful, how I waited to use my own sink until she left the room. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed and realized something I didn't want to admit. I was a guest in my own house. Have you ever stayed silent just to avoid being called difficult? Sarah came home on a Sunday afternoon. I knew because the suitcase wheels scraped the front step. That familiar, impatient sound. Before I could even say hello, Evelyn was already crying. Not quiet crying. The kind meant to be noticed. I didn't want to say anything, Evelyn said, pressing a hand to her chest. But I can't keep pretending I'm okay. Sarah dropped her bag and went straight to her. What happened? Sarah asked. Not to me, to her. I stood there, holding a dish towel, watching the scene set itself without my input. She makes me feel like I'm in the way, Evelyn said, like I'm a burden. She sniffed. I've been doing everything I can to help. Cleaning, organizing. I even cook when she lets me. That last part was new. Sarah finally looked at me. Mom, she said, already tired. Is this true? I opened my mouth, then closed it. I didn't know where to start because everything she'd just heard was wrong. But not loud wrong. Twisted wrong. She moved my things. I said, Evelyn invited people over without asking. Evelyn shook her head slowly. I asked. She said, she just doesn't remember. That landed harder than a lie. That sounded like concern. Sarah sighed. She's been through a lot. Sarah said to me, you know that. So have I. I said, my voice came out smaller than I wanted. Evelyn wiped her eyes. I never meant to cause problems. She said, I thought family meant support. Family. Another word with weight. Sarah crossed her arms. I don't understand why this is so hard for you. She said, Evelyn is not asking for much. I looked at Sarah. Really looked. She hadn't asked me one question. Not one. I opened my home. I said, that counts for something. She nodded, but her eyes were already elsewhere. I just need you to be more patient. Sarah said, okay. That was the verdict. Evelyn stood up and hugged Sarah. Thank you, she whispered, loud enough for me to hear. I went to the kitchen and sat down. My hands were shaking, and I couldn't tell if it was anger or grief, maybe both. I realized then that whatever I said next wouldn't be heard as truth. It would be heard as defense. I had already lost, which hurts more being ignored or being misjudged. It happened later that night, not during the crying, not during the explanations. After things had calmed down, which really meant I'd stopped talking. Sarah followed me into the living room. Evelyn stayed behind, close enough to hear, but far enough to pretend she wasn't listening. We need to be clear, Sarah said. She stood like she was about to list chores. You have to take care of her. I waited. I honestly thought there would be more. When there wasn't, I said, take care how? She's family now. Sarah said, she needs support. Evelyn is not in a position to handle things on her own. I nodded. That's what I used to do. Then I realized I didn't feel confused or guilty. I felt finished. You should have asked first. I said. Sarah blinked. Asked what? I looked past her, at Evelyn sitting on my couch, pretending to scroll through her phone. Asked if this was okay. I said, asked if I agreed. Sarah's voice hardened. I don't see why this is even a discussion. That did it. Not the words. The tone, like my house was already decided. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't pace. I didn't explain my side again. I said, because this is not her house. The room froze. Even the scrolling stopped. Sarah laughed once, short and sharp. You're being dramatic. No, I said. I'm being clear. She stared at me like I'd switched languages. So what? Sarah said. You're just going to abandon her. I shook my head. I'm not abandoning anyone, I said. I'm just not giving up my home. Evelyn finally looked up. I never wanted to cause tension. She said quietly. I met her eyes. Then you shouldn't have let my daughter speak for me. No one answered that. Something settled in me then. Heavy, solid. I was done negotiating my own space. Done explaining why I deserved it. I went to bed knowing one thing for sure. Whatever happened next, it wouldn't be accidental. What boundary have you been afraid to enforce? I didn't announce my exit. That would have invited another debate I had no intention of winning. I waited for the house to settle into a hollow quiet. Sarah was tucked away in the guest room. Evelyn was sprawled on my sofa, the television murmuring to an empty room. I stood in my bedroom, surveying the walls like a guest checking out of a hotel I'd never booked. I packed with a surgeon's precision, legal papers, essential medication, 2 changes of clothes, the wool sweater my sister gave me, everything else the heirlooms. The heavy oak furniture stayed behind. Not because those things didn't matter, but because I was finished proving they belonged to me. Sarah knocked softly once. Are you really turning in this early? She asked through the wood. Yes, I replied. My voice steady. She hesitated, perhaps sensing the shift. We'll talk tomorrow. We already did. I said. It was the last explanation I would ever offer her. I slipped out through the side door. No grand goodbye. No dramatic pause on the threshold. My car keys felt unnervingly heavy, a weighted anchor finally being lifted. I drove 3 blocks before pulling into a darkened lot to call Ellen. She was the sharpest broker I knew, someone who understood that real estate was often about more than just houses. Marjorie, she answered, her voice alert. Is everything all right? I'm ready to sign. I said, the cash offer we discussed last week. Let's finalize it. There was a professional pause, thick with understanding. Are you absolutely certain? She asked. I've never been surer of anything, I said. She didn't ask for reasons. That was why I'd spent the last 4 days quietly preparing with her. I hung up and sat in the dark, hands resting on the steering wheel, heart beating with a slow, rhythmic calm. I expected to feel the cold prickle of panic or the weight of regret. Instead, I felt light. I wasn't running away. I was moving toward a version of myself I'd almost forgotten. By the time I pulled back onto the road, I knew the bridge was gone. I didn't know where the path led yet, but I knew I would never again negotiate for the right to breathe in my own home. I knew the hammer had fallen when my phone began to vibrate incessantly against the dashboard. I was sitting in my car, parked beneath a weeping willow a few miles away, watching Sarah's name pulse on the screen. I ignored the first 3 attempts. By the 4th, the voicemail icons began to stack like a deck of cards. I finally answered on the 6th ring. What have you done? Sarah screamed. No greeting, no breath. I closed the sale. I said, my voice sounding like it belonged to a stranger. I heard her sharp, jagged inhale. You can't just do that. It's not legal. It is perfectly legal, I replied. I signed the final papers at dawn. Sarah's voice fractured, anger colliding with sheer panic. There's a man here. Mom, he's standing on the porch with a locksmith. He says he owns the place. That would be Mr. Henderson, I said. The new owner. A second voice cut in, shrill and demanding, muffled as if she were grabbing at the phone. Evelyn, this is a mistake. Tell this man to leave. I live here. I closed my eyes, feeling a profound, heavy exhaustion. No, Evelyn, I said softly. You were just staying there. Sarah snatched the phone back. Mom, where are we supposed to go? Our things are inside. I leaned my head back against the seat. That was a conversation we should have had before you started rearranging my life. You treated my home like a waiting room. That's not fair, Sarah snapped. You didn't even warn us. I told you it wasn't her house, I said. You simply chose not to believe I meant it. In the background, I heard the new owner's voice, calm, firm, and terrifyingly final. Ladies, he said, his voice drifting through the speaker. The sheriff is on standby. Please remove your personal bags. This property transferred at 8 this morning. How much did she get for it? Evelyn shrieked in the distance. I didn't wait for him to answer. Enough, I said. Enough to buy back my own future. A devastating silence fell over the line. Sarah's voice returned, barely a whisper. You chose a check over us. I shook my head, though she couldn't see me. No, I said. I chose my dignity after you decided I didn't need any. Evelyn muttered something bitter, but I didn't care to hear it. This is cruel. Mom, no, I said, watching a bird take flight from the willow tree. This is final. I ended the call and switched the phone off. My hands were trembling now, the adrenaline finally ebbing away. I sat there until the air in the car felt still. I didn't feel like a victor. I felt hollowed out, like a house cleared of its clutter before a storm. I whispered the words one last time to the empty car. Because it was never her house. The apartment I chose is modest. It has only one bedroom and a view of a small, sun-drenched park. The door sticks unless you lift the handle just right. But the air inside is mine. It is quiet in a way my old house hadn't been for years, a silence that doesn't feel like waiting for the next demand. On my first night, I painted the living room a soft, mossy green. I didn't consult a designer. I didn't send photos to Sarah for approval. I simply dipped the brush and began. Sarah called 2 days later. Are you okay? She asked. Her voice was brittle, like she was walking on thin glass. I am, I said, and for the first time in a decade, I wasn't saying it to end a conversation. I was stating a fact. She waited for the usual apology, the crack in my resolve. It never came. I still don't agree with how you handled things, Sarah said. I know, I replied calmly, and yet I still did it. That was the extent of our talk. We speak now on occasion short, neutral exchanges on common ground. There are no visits and no assumptions. Whenever Sarah slips into her old habit of telling me what I should do, I stop her. Not with anger, but with a firm, quiet hand. I'm not taking orders anymore, I say. The sentence still feels heavy in my mouth, but it fits. It has the weight of truth. What I've learned is this, and I say it quietly if you wait until your later years to set boundaries. The world will act as if you've committed a crime. People will act surprised because they've mistaken your grace for weakness. Let them be surprised. That doesn't mean you are wrong. Money wasn't the victory. The house wasn't the prize. The real triumph was choosing where to stand when the people I loved told me to step aside. At night, I lock my door. I keep my hand on the knob a second longer than necessary, savoring the sound of the deadbolt clicking into place. I listen to the beautiful, absolute nothingness. If this story feels like a mirror, if you've been silenced or pushed to the edge of your own life, know that it is never too late to speak. Even if your voice shakes, even if you are the only one listening. I turn off the lamp and sit in the soft green shadows of my room, knowing that tomorrow will be simple, and more importantly, it will be mine. If peace costs you a lopsided relationship, was it ever a relationship worth keeping?